Larry, today we have essentially the summertime edition of the Citizens Grand Jury. We're going to be doing a bit of a recap for people who have maybe just joined us. Where would you like to begin today, Larry?
I'd like to begin with what's the state of the nation today. We know what the state of the nation is. Although I wrote a book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, I'd like people to read it because I have a real action plan. Such as citizens' grand juries, which we are here on today, Third Continental Congress's hard-hitting cases that we brought, for instance, for peaceful protesters that were at the Capitol on January 6th that are being persecuted, being treated as if they're war criminals, in effect. We have fought back. I want to call people's attention to the fact that it's time now to act. And just yesterday, one of the judges that I've talked about in the past, Judge Amy Berman Jackson, federal judge, U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, the most politicized court in this country, even more politicized than the Northern District of California and the Ninth Circuit. Judges in that court have routinely vilified and condemned the people that were at the Capitol, even peacefully and legally, equating them to domestic terrorists, saying that they would not let them out of prison pending their trial in many instances, some even being thrown into solitary confinement because President Trump is out there still propagating the big lie that the election was stolen. To this day, we don't know whether or not it was stolen or not because there never was an evidentiary hearing. There never was a trial to set forth the evidence. Yet these judges have become political mouthpieces for the left, for the Democrat Party, or for the Republican establishment. Some of these judges include, but are not limited to, not just Amy Berman Jackson, not just a judge that I used to admire, Judge Royce Lamberth, who was appointed by President Reagan, who somehow has gone south, so to speak, or native, Judge James Boasberg, Colleen Kohler-Catelli, who wins the award for the #1 worst judge I've ever been in front of in terms of her bias and prejudice, not just towards me, but to other conservatives, people of faith, and those who believe in the Constitution. But I want to show you the reason for being for these citizens' grand juries. And we're taking a hiatus from the deliberation today because some of the grand juries are on vacation. We will reassemble them by next week or whenever they are available. Last week we read a detailed indictment with regard to Dr. Anthony Fauci on a number of different grounds, accounts being lying to the American people, collaborating with communist China in the Wuhan lab, which gave rise to the COVID-19 pandemic, matters involving not registering as a foreign agent, which he is, in effect, on behalf of communist China, and a number of other issues. We had previously indicted Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden for a massive racketeering and bribery scheme with money being laundered from communist China, Ukraine, and Russia. And last year, we indicted Robert Mueller. We will be proceeding with these indictments, the ones that we have not yet procured, which is Fauci's, and others who are on the horizon. And then we will try, we will seek convictions, we will sentence. We'll seek to meet those sentences out. And we'll ask law enforcement to meet them out. We're not going to resort to violence or threats or intimidation or anything like that. We're going to do what needs to be done. The American people need to rise up. And that's why these citizens' grand juries are so important. And that's why what I wrote about in my book, It Takes a Revolution, is very different than the way, for instance, Mark Levin approaches questions. Mark Levin is basically establishment. And I commend him for his intelligence. Everybody that writes things are helpful. But writing about American Marxism, we already know about American Marxism. We don't need it detailed. It's like me. I already know that Jesus Christ exists. He came to me on 3 occasions. What now we need to do is take the action that Jesus took, that the Father took, and real action. So that's the reason for these citizens' grand juries. And I just want to read to you some quotes by Amy Berman Jackson yesterday because she had in front of her, this is why we need to take back our legal system, because these very compromised, corrupt, and politicized judges are now in control of our faith. of our fate and our faith. Because, as Thomas Jefferson said, unelected, unaccountable to the people, they would become despots and tyrants. He predicted that. No more honest than any other man or woman, not above the law, but believing that they're above the law, because they also believe they have lifetime tenure, although that's not really true. They can be removed for bad behavior. But only 8 of them in 245 years have been removed, about 1 every 32 years. The Congress doesn't do its job. Nobody does its job anymore. We have no government, which is why we also did our Third Continental Congress. And I hope that you'll watch those proceedings, which are continuing, at freedomwatchusa.org to discuss whether we need to declare independence again and to do it peacefully and legally and to form a new government by and for the people with equal rights for everyone under the laws of nature and nature's God. But Amy Berman Jackson is perhaps the poster child or poster judge for what's wrong with the judiciary, the federal judiciary in particular. And she is the most extreme. Now, let me just read you something she said. There's an article that appeared in CNN, of course, the communist news network, this morning, talking about that patriotism is loyalty to country, loyalty to the Constitution. Well, that's correct. But what she's doing is saying that the people that were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th peacefully and legally, those who were either on the mall watching President Trump or on Capitol Hill at the Capitol, who were led in by Capitol Police. Yes, the dirty little secret is the Capitol Police were on the side of the people, mostly. There were some that weren't. They finally conjured up a few for hearings last week. But by and large, the police know what's going on. The military knows what's going on. Everybody knows what's going on. They know that the country has been turned into a socialist, borderline communist, and atheist state in less than 6 months under Biden and Harris. They know what's going on. And they understood that the president, President Trump, could not even get a hearing from his own Supreme Court justices as to whether there was fraud, whether there were election irregularities. And certainly the latter is certainly true at a minimum, given the massive amount of mail-in ballots that were sent out to people, frankly, many of whom don't even exist on this earth, and the ability, as in some states, for illegal aliens to vote. And also in states like California and New York, where you can get paper ballots and then go in and vote in person. These government people don't check that in reality. They don't. They're more concerned with their coffee and donuts in the morning and going home at 5 p.m. Tell me about it. I worked in government. I worked at the Justice Department. I know what goes on. So I want to read you some quotes. This is what she said to one of the defendants regarding a guy named Carl Dresch, D-R-E-S-C-H. Quote, "You called yourself and everyone else patriots, but that's not patriotism," Judge Amy Berman Jackson said of defendant Carl Dresch. This is the CNN article. Quote, "Patriotism is loyalty to country, loyalty to the Constitution, not loyalty to the head of state. That is the tyranny we rejected on July 4th. Of course, if this had been Barack Obama who appointed her to the court, it would have included loyalty to the chief of state." She then goes on to say, calling Dresch, quote, "an enthusiastic participant in an effort to subvert democracy, to stop the will of the people and replace it with the will of the mob." Well, yes, the will of the mob. What do you call Antifa? What do you call Black Lives Matter? What do you call the new Black Panthers Party? What do you call Louis Farrakhan? What do you call members of the radical Marxian Jewish left? What do you call radical feminists, gays, lesbians, transgenders, and radical blacks? Others, okay? These people have participated in pillaging this country now for a number of years. Little to no action is ever taken to restrain them. Even President Trump didn't. He was afraid politically that that would cost him in the election. But the job should have been done. And consequently, it depends what ox is being gored. These judges are not independent arbiters of justice. She then adds, "The defendant did not spend 6 months in jail because he's a political prisoner. He was not prosecuted for his political views," Jackson said. "The defendant came to the Capitol because he placed his trust in someone who repaid that trust by lying to him. Well, I would submit that this is Amy Berman Jackson, the person who dismissed a case filed by Charles Woods and Pat Smith, Gold Star parents of people who died at Benghazi, Ty Woods and Sean Smith, on the eve of Memorial Day. Can you believe that? Memorial Day. And wouldn't give us a hearing. That somehow, this defendant is political. That case involved Hillary Clinton. She got rid of it because it was Hillary Clinton. She got rid of it because she had even donated money to Hillary Clinton for her 2008 campaign. That's my opinion. And that's what you're dealing with. The case went up on appeal to appellate judges, one of which also gave to Hillary Clinton, and nothing ever happened, even though Hillary Clinton had committed wrongful death. She used an unsecure email server, giving rise to the coordinates of Ambassador Christopher Smith, thereby leading the terrorists to kill not just him, but Ty Woods and Sean Smith. She also defamed our clients, calling them liars, in effect. She was not a government person at the time. She was not immune from prosecution, but Amy Berman Jackson had no problem dismissing that, because if you're on her side, then all is well, do whatever you want. But if you are, in fact, a Trump supporter or a conservative or a person of faith or whatever, then there's a different standard of justice. She then went on to say that Trump continues to propagate the lie that inspired the attack on a near daily basis, and that, quote, the anger surrounding the false accusation continues to be stoked by multimedia outlets as well as the state and federal party leaders who are intent on censoring those who dare to challenge the former president's version of events, unquote. That was in a prior hearing with one of these Capitol peaceful protesters. Now, this is what we're dealing with, okay? So Amy Berman Jackson is now the poster federal judge to understand why we have to have citizens' grand juries and take our country back, take our legal system back as our founding fathers did in 1776, under the laws of nature and nature's God. And this is why you, the American people, must now rise up. You have no protectors on the federal bench. They don't exist, Democrat or Republican. They didn't even stand up for Trump and give him a hearing. They wouldn't even do that because they're part of that establishment. They don't want to rock the boat. They're happy with their so-called lifetime tenure. They're happy with all their pensions, and they're happy with the fact that they're not accountable. The Supreme Court gave their justices and other judges immunity, so they can't be touched under this legal system. But under our citizens' grand juries, they can be touched, and we will be holding judges accountable as well. So stay tuned. This is a very short broadcast today. Everything that we advocate is peaceful, it's legal. In 1992, Justice Antonin Scalia, as I've said many times, you can go out and read it, you can Google it, in a case United States versus Williams, ruled for the majority of the Supreme Court that the grand jury belongs to the American people, not, repeat that, not the three branches of government. And in the days of the Old West in particular, before we had a Justice Department, the people sought to mete out fairly, legally, and under the laws of nature and nature's God, justice on behalf of a newly formed and great nation. We must do that again, and we must rise up because the courts will protect us no longer, not that they ever have to any great extent, but as of today, you can't find one Republican or Democrat judge that will stand up for the peaceful protesters that were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Those who committed crimes deserve to be held to account, but they were very few and far between. The great majority, and I have some clients, were there peacefully and legally. They had their homes broken into at 5:45 a.m. They were handcuffed in front of their friends and their friends' children. They were denied right of counsel. Their property was confiscated. And when you make an inquiry, as I have, with the Biden-Harris Justice Department, when they'll get their property back, and you file a Privacy Act request asking for the FBI 302 reports, they basically tell you, go stick it. Well, the American people are now in the position of sticking it, and we will do it peacefully and legally, and they will be held accountable. So stay tuned. We'll be back next week.
Larry, sorry, before we go, I just wanted to add a few things, because you were mentioning that we don't have protectors in the federal judiciary. At this point, it seems we have antagonists there. just everything that you're describing about Amy Berman Jackson and the various cases that you've been bringing, I want to remind our viewers to visit freedomwatchusa.org, where they can make a tax-deductible contribution to help Larry and his team at Freedom Watch. It takes a lot of time and resources to put together these citizens' grand juries. People can watch the replays of those on freedomwatchusa.org. People can also subscribe to the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. Larry posts all kinds of videos from his podcast and the simulcasts of our citizens' grand juries there. People can also watch the Freedom Watch Third Continental Congress, really historic proceedings, and I want to just make sure that everybody has seen that if they haven't already. I also want to remind people, Larry, that viewer sponsors make this show possible by supporting Crowdsource the Truth on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We're going to have a lot more to say about January 6th, the ongoing effort to educate people through these citizens' grand juries. And I also want to remind, Larry, the skeptical folks among our viewers who question if we have the legal authority to do this. And of course we do. You've outlined it many times. But for those people who challenge that notion, I'd like them to just absorb this program as an incredibly well thought through intellectual format for a television show where we're educating people into the history of the United States, our rights under the Constitution, and the process of the grand jury. And with that, I'd like
Very
to
well said. And I might add, Jason, is that there are a number of states that actually have citizens' grand juries, state-sponsored citizens' grand juries. So this is not a unique concept. But thank you. That was a very excellent presentation. And I do want to educate people. It's important. And we want to educate people more than just about reading books. Again, I commend Mark Levin. He's a bright guy. He wrote a book, American Marxism. He's selling it, every 2 minutes on his radio show. I listen to him too sometimes. But he doesn't have an action plan that really is going to work. It's just basically more of the same. Let's dish it off to government officials to do the job that we need to do. Well, they're not going to do it for us. We need to do it for ourselves. So God bless you.
You've reminded me of one thing. We keep reminding each other of things. I do enjoy Mark Levin's commentary, but I was very troubled to notice that the floor of his studio set has got the compass rose as featured in the CIA logo. And I've also noticed Sean Hannity wearing a CIA pin. So I'm very skeptical of the role that these corporate-sponsored news outlets play in terms of actually sharing information versus just, as you've said many times, Larry, keeping people sitting idly by their television sets waiting for the next thing to happen.
Yeah, these people they're the establishment, Jason.
Right.
We see what the establishment did. The establishment threw President Trump under the bus, and remember that Mark Levin was vehemently anti-Trump until Trump won. And then he threw his lot with Trump. Same thing for Glenn Beck. Same thing for Ben Shapiro. These people, frankly, are hypocritical in many ways. They go with the flow. But the American people cannot go with the flow. Another one is Matt Schlapp at the American Conservative Union. They tried to destroy Trump in the beginning. So you got to be very skeptical when you look at some of these conservative sources. We have to do it for ourselves. Okay, we cannot follow like sheep. And that's the message that I have, and we have the tools to do it. So I want to thank everybody for listening to us. If you have anything more to add, give us your usual excellent insight.
Well, thank you, Larry, and thanks to everyone who's been participating in the Citizens Grand Jury. We will be back next week. I hope everyone is enjoying this lovely summer day. Larry, thank you and your team at Freedom Watch. Our viewers can visit the website at freedomwatchusa.org. Make sure you watch the Third Continental Congress. It was a historic effort and really an excellent presentation by everyone involved. And with that, we'll see everybody next week. Thanks.